Hey everybody, and welcome to episode number 44 of the third season of the Fantasy Fullback Dive, brought to you by the good people at the Roto Street Journal. The Dive is the only podcast that's going to pave your way, going to be your lead blocker to fantasy glory, fantasy paradise, fantasy championships. Whatever your fantasy is, football-related fantasy, that is, the Roto Street Journal is going to help you get there. I, of course, am your host, Nat the Truth Jones. With me, as always, the Wolf of Roto Street himself, fresh back from Chi-Town. How you doing, Wolf?
It's one of those weird situations where everything outside of my own personal body and head and everything about me, everything else is great. The Pats won. It was a fantastic game, an absolute blast. Some great shit talk between the Bears fans and us, and nobody got hurt, which is nice. So that was fun. The city itself, I don't know if you've been, but it was a blast. A really cool city, great food. So we had a great weekend, but flying in late last night, getting in around 2 in the morning, and then going in to teach today was some sort of hell that I wouldn't wish upon my worst mortal enemy, which is right now Corey Davis. Big fantasy win as well.
Corey Davis.
Everything is coming up in speed. What a fucking loser. Yeah, we'll talk about him in a little bit on our stock watch. But pretty much everything's coming up in spades outside my own personal well-being. I am in the roughest of shape, but we're still here. We're going to still give you our stock watch, all the risers, fallers. And we've got some big trades going down with Amari Cooper. We got a lot to cover. So, I'm going to stick this one out for my Wolfpack. You boys know I love you. And females that listen, my mom and, maybe one other out there, who knows. But either way, I'm pumped to get this out there. I feel back at home, back at health when I'm talking about fantasy football.
I know you are in your element. I know you can just wing this thing even in bad shape. How'd your teams do this week? What do you think you're going to go? I know we still got the Monday night game coming up. Real nail biter here between the Giants and the Falcons. I think, what are they, a combined like 2-10?
Seriously, I know.
3-9, something like that.
I can't believe the Falcons are like on the same level of the Giants record-wise. It's just awful. I can't believe I have to keep watching the Giants. Why do they keep getting primetime games?
I think they're going to start getting. I think they're going to start getting flexed out of the ones that they can be. I don't know if they can flex Monday night games though. I think they're in stone kind of right.
Exactly. No, but I'm in position to go 5-0, which would be sweet.
Oh, nice.
A big night from Calvin Ridley, and not even like a huge night. 8-point night would make me, a 5-0 week. So that'd be pretty fantastic. I've already got the Fez locked up. It was pretty fun plane ride home. We had JetBlue, so we had the Sunday night game.
That.
Sitting next to Dave Mock, my rival, who I'm facing, and he had AJ Green and Andy Dalton going, which did AJ Green did his thing in the first couple quarters, but ultimately Pat Mahomes just wouldn't put his dick away, just relentlessly pummeling Dave the entire flight. So that was fun, all hungover and drunk and whatnot on the flight, being right next to your buddy, trapped in the air and just staring in his eyes as you pull away.
That sounds pretty nice.
That was a pretty fantastic experience.
Staring in his eyes as you pull away. I love that. That's fantastic.
How about you? How'd your leagues go?
It looks like I'm probably going to end up 3-1, which is solid. I mean, I'm pretty much doing that every week, which is nice. I could get really unlucky if Tevin Coleman just absolutely blows up.
How much of a blow up?
25, 26, 27, something like that. I mean it's possible. I mean, it could happen. So I'm not celebrating yet, but it could happen. I did play one of the other strong playoff teams in my hometown league and just absolutely lit them up. I know sometimes, it's a fantasy podcast, so I'm going to say it. Started 4 receivers, DeAndre Hopkins, John Brown, Emmanuel Sanders, and Jarvis Landry, and every one of them. Hopkins was just, like a touchdown, wasn't a huge game. Everyone else just blew the fuck up.
Yeah.
And then I had awesome. Phillip Rivers, I had Tariq Cohen, who you told everybody was going to blow up against the Patriots, and he totally did. It was solid. And you want to know something? I took a 0 from Gronk intentionally. Rather than drop somebody on my bench. I did it because I was like, you know what? I'm going to win this game anyway, and I did.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's ballsy. Yeah. Like that.
Good
anyway,
shit.
Yeah, and that was with Sony Michel getting hurt too. All right, we're going to get right into the podcast. Episode 44. I wish it was episode 40 so I could say let's pour a 40 out on the curb for Jamal Charles, who was released by the Jaguars.
I know, our boy Cha-Cha.
I know, our boy Cha-Cha. Man, it seems like maybe his better days are maybe behind us, maybe like 5 years behind us. Anyway, love Cha-Cha. If this is the end, which it probably should be, great run. Not for the Jags, but great run. Mm-hmm. All right, here we go. We've talked about the Bears. We've talked about all this stuff. We've talked about how you survived fantasy cancers. Davis and Shady, never playing them in the right week. And you're saying you want a glossary term from that? I got it.
Let's say, is fantasy cancer the right term, or is there something better? Because it's one of those things where they'll go off, but anytime they've gone off, they've been on my bench.
I think it's,
anytime I put them in, they kill me. Like, that's a glossary term I'm looking to come up with, whether it's cancer, whether it's something else.
I think it's fantasy. I think it's fantasy 3-card Monty.
You have to explain that one to me.
That's the one where the guy has 3 cards on the street and he's moving around so you can find the red ace, and it looks really easy, and then you pick it up and you're always wrong.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about? Where you get just hustled on the street by some guy who's really good at palming cards.
Yep.
Fantasy 3-card Monty. Also, fantasy whack-a-mole came to mind.
Whack-a-mole is a good one, too. Yeah, you're never hitting it. I like that.
Never hitting it. 3-card Monty, you pretty much always lose. Anyway, mull them over. I think it's a great idea for a term. I actually put it in the glossary. We will definitely get to it.
Yes.
Good work. And I know how you feel. I hate having like a situation like that on my team. Like, if I have a good quarterback, it's like I have Phillip Rivers in this one league, and then I got Kirk Cousins, and it's like I almost hate having him. Because if he was worse, I would never think about it. With Cousins, it's like, they're both kind of like top 7 quarterbacks. And I hate having to think about it, because if one of them does better, then I'm like, I screwed up. I'd rather almost just have no backup.
It's so tough sometimes, man. It's the worst. Never go with the right one, of course.
Fantasy 3-card Monty. Anyway, Amari Cooper traded to the Cowboys for a first-round pick, allegedly. What do we think of this? I mean, is this going to make his stock go up significantly? I figure he can't be worse, right?
I mean, you think that, and he's just been so inconsistent. 2 booms, 4 busts. You never know what you're getting out of the guy. So you'd assume going to the just completely talent-starved Cowboys, they got no wide receivers in there to really compete with him, that this should help his value. But you look at the Cowboys as well, they're one of the lowest volume, most anemic passing attacks, whether that was because they had no receivers or whether that's by design. We'll end up seeing here. Obviously, Amari becomes the centerpiece of that, but they were just 29th right now in run-to-pass ratio. Makes sense when you got Zeke Elliott as your centerpiece. Only 28th in attempts for 206, 28th in yards, 1,282, and only 8 touchdowns so far on the year. So, I mean, they've really just been a complete shithouse of passing. You can't really produce much going there. Dak Prescott hasn't been anything overly exciting, again, whether that's by design because that's their offensive scheme or whether it's just they've had nobody else to throw to, remains to be seen. One thing he does have going for him, he's got his bye this week, so he's got another week to kind of learn the offense. So it's annoying if you have Cooper and you've been relying on him. Well, hopefully you're not relying on him because he's the most unreliable player right now. But if you were relying on him, he has another week to kind of learn this offense, get acclimated. And once he's fully got it, he's got a fantastic slate of matchups here. He's got the Eagles twice, giving up the 4th most points to receivers. Falcons, we already have seen a complete joke. He's got the Saints, Colts, and Tampa. I mean, all of those defenses are horrendous. So over 75% of his matchups are going to be against jokes moving forward. So maybe this becomes a situation. There was a couple years ago where, and this was the same coordinator, Scott Linehan, where it was Dez and Zeke, and they just both were dominant. They kind of established that play action for each other and just fed off each other. Maybe that's what Cooper becomes here. Linehan does have a history of dominating with number 1 receivers, even dating back to Calvin Johnson with the Lions. So it could be a positive, but he's got to learn this playbook. He's got the matchups to do it. Maybe this is the spark. It can't be a bad thing. It's not worse for him because he was just certainly – you couldn't even use him when he was with the Raiders. At least he might find some type of value here with the Cowboys.
Yeah, I got him stashed on my bench, and I was like thinking of moving him, and now I think I'll just sit on him for a week or two and just kind of see what happens,
Exactly.
I'm not expecting much. My expectations are low, so I don't think I'll be disappointed either way. All right, let's talk about Sunday action. We're going to hit some risers and some fallers, and we'll talk to you about a little bit of injuries and maybe 1, maybe 2 penny stocks, and we'll send you on our way. Get this thing out tonight. You can watch Monday Night Football if you like torturing yourself and watching the Giants. You know what? As awful as they are, I'm probably going to watch it. All right, risers. Kareem Hunt, and this is a guy I texted you last night. I've been thinking this for a while. I finally came out and said it. Next year, barring injury, this guy is my RB2 going into the draft behind Gurley. I mean, there's nobody I'd rather have than him. I know we talked about Melvin Gordon and stuff like that. I just have seen Hunt do too much, and this offense is just too ridiculous. Did you see him hurdle that guy last night?
Oh, yeah. I saw it all on the plane.
Just checking.
It's amazing. Hey, it got me enough touchdown for Pat Mahomes. Everything you just said is perfectly validated. Again, that fantasy stock formula we grade everybody out on. Talent. 100% there with Hunt. He's a good that hurdle, the tackle breaking. The guy's an unbelievable beast when running. It just he churns like no other back other than maybe Gurley. He's an unbelievable talent. And then the usage, that was the one question mark. That's why we weren't so high on him heading into the season, as he had those disappearing acts in 2017. And Spencer Ware's coming back. Is he going to maintain that red zone role when Ware was very good at the stripe? Well, so far through 7 weeks, that question's been answered emphatically. That it's going to be much more consistent in 2018. The receiving usage has gone up each week. He's got 5+ receptions in back-to-back games, a receiving score in back-to-back games, and he's the 5th in the league in red zone carries at 18 carries, and he's obviously converting at a high rate. thankfully, as you mentioned too, that explosive offense around him, that's part of this reason he's so juicy. He's finding those red zone opportunities week in and week out. How can you stuff the box when you've got these vertical weapons on the outside and Pat Mahomes cannon arm? You can't put more. You can't stuff the box to stop Hunt, so he's getting these favorable run looks every single time he touches the ball.
Yep.
There's nothing to not love here. The usage, the surrounding talent, and the individual talent is all there. Andy Reid seems to finally have waken up, and the walrus is not just letting Hunt disappear again. So ultimately, to me, yes, he rose to number 4 on my overall big board, behind only, and this is all debatable, number 2 for you, which I can totally see. The only guy that's clearly above him is Todd Gurley.
Yep.
And then I personally go Melvin Gordon and Saquon Barkley. I mean, Melvin Gordon, the number 2 scorer in fantasy right now, even with missing this week. I couldn't go, Hunt above him quite yet, because there is that risk Andy Reid just falls back to his old ways, which he'd have to be a real fucking moron to do.
Well, I mean,
and I don't think he will.
There's some precedent for that, but I don't think so. Yeah. I hear you on Gordon, although I don't agree. I think you're nuts as far as Barkley goes. That's to me just borderline completely
what makes
crazy.
You down on Barkley? Why?
I'm not down on Barkley. I mean, it's like, I think Barkley's really good. I don't know how you could legitimately put somebody that is in an offense that shitty on the same level as somebody that is on an offense that is just producing points like they're printing their own money. I just don't I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me, regardless of even if you think he's a much better talent than Hunt, which maybe he is.
And I don't.
But Hunt's great. I mean, like, you just it's like a machine in Kansas City. They just put up points like crazy, and he just gets so much usage. I don't know how you could possibly put Barkley above him. Gordon, maybe. I hear you. The Chargers have that great offense. But anyway, we'll see how it shakes out. We'll see how Barkley looks tonight against a pretty shitty defense.
Right. It's a good point. It's a good point.
All right, let's talk about Nick Chubb. Is Nick Chubb giving you a Chubb lately? Is that what's going on?
Absolutely. The pants are rising a little bit when Chubb the name comes in there. While I was in Chicago, actually on the architecture tour. Fantastic tour, by the way. So, I mean, we'll cut just real quick. I'll just say, have you ever done that before in Chicago?
No, I haven't. Would not have occurred to me to do that, but go ahead.
No, I know. I wouldn't have to me either, but everyone else was golfing. I fucking hate golf, and it was unbelievable. Just really cool. Not something I thought I'd be into, and I was really into it, but as I was on it, news broke about Nick Chubb, which was that Carlos Hyde got traded to the Jaguars out of nowhere. Who knows what they're thinking, because they say Leonard Fournette's going to be back after the bye. So I don't know what's going on there, but regardless, Nick Chubb now became that clear-cut early down back, at least in theory, after the trade. And then Sunday confirmed that, which was really nice to see. 18 carries, 80 yards, and a TD. Solid effort among running backs with at least 30 attempts. He's now the pace setter in yards after contact per attempt at 6.8. He's getting yards after contact. So the guy's churning out broken tackles, missed tackle percentage 32 according to Pro Football Focus. So the guy is churning out yardage, which is fantastic to see. And his upcoming schedule is a complete joke. He outsnapped Duke Johnson to 45-35, but obviously the touch total was much more vast with Duke Johnson just touching the ball 5 times as compared to Chubb's 18. So, I mean, everything is favoring Chubb. Fantasy playoffs, he gets Carolina, Denver, who's been getting destroyed for 200 yards a game by running backs, Cincinnati, who we just saw get absolutely manhandled by Kareem Hunt. So his fantasy playoff schedule looking nice. He's got Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Atlanta leading up to that, and then another date with Cincinnati. So his schedule is a joke. This guy is the looks of every year those stretch run, waiver wire season changers, those difference makers, those title bringers emerge. And I'd be really surprised if Chubb isn't that. He seems almost guaranteed to be as long as he stays healthy. He was available in 28% of leagues before the trade.
Not anymore,
now he's
dude.
obviously much more vastly owned. But ultimately, I think he's going to be a true difference maker, high end RB2, potentially a low end RB1 when all said and done with this schedule coming up.
Yeah, I picked him up, and as Sony Michel started for me this weekend. I'm on the bench. I got to say, I'm thrilled to now be able to just plug Chubb in there.
Yeah, that's smooth. That was smooth.
Very, very happy about that.
Oh, remember, too, on the podcast last week, I said as my Hail Mary, Nick Chubb might plot in for a touchdown. I actually was desperate in a league, in my Holy Cross League, where I can't do any wrong. I'm 7-0. It's unbelievable. Nice. I picked him up that day before he got traded, just as, my desperation touchdown plunger. And then, of course, he ends up getting traded, and now he's the featured back. So that league's just incredible. Anything I do in that league, I'll make sure to tell you, because
let me know.
It seems like I can't do any wrong. All the stars seem to align for me there. But yeah, fantastic. Nick Chubb, you got to feel really excited about quality RB2.
I feel good about him because also, he started, I want to say, 7 rushes for 10 yards, and they stuck with him. And it worked its way out, and he ended up, 4.5 yards a carry, touchdown. It was solid.
Really good point. Yeah, they didn't cave on him.
Yeah, I was worried they might give up early, but I mean, I guess when you trade the other guy, you got to go with him, right? Trey Burton. A guy last week, I was even saying to you, like, how come he hasn't blown up more? And you were like, he hasn't been that bad. He hasn't been the absolute, like, standout we hope. But, like, you called me a little bit on me being down on him, said he's probably been better than you think. He had a really good game this week.
Absolutely. I saw it live in person. He got 11 targets, caught 9 of them for 126 and a TD. And he was just used all over the field in the short, run after the catch type situations, streaking down the seams for 30-yarders. The guy was just a monster the entire quarter. And he, Mitch Trubisky, every time he was scrambling, there was only one guy he was locking into every time, and it was none of the receivers. It was always Trey Burton. So this was that most Travis Kelce-esque move tight end role that we've been envisioning this whole year. The usage finally aligned, and he had that type of game. So you got to feel really confident in him as a quality. People Roto-World calls him a back end tight end one. I believe he's a nice locked in, right up there with George Kittle. Had another big day himself. He's just a monster, that college roommate connection with Beathard. But I think Burton is right there below, Travis Kelce and Zach Ertz and Gronk. You got that tier. And then there's a tier to me, and it's Trey Burton and it's George Kittle. And those two are kind of it in that tier. Maybe David Njoku is pushing his way there with Baker Mayfield. But Burton this game just locked it up. He's gotten all that unique shovel passes, and now he gets down the seams and the run after the catch. It's everything you want to see, and it's clear that him and Trubisky do have that connection, whereas Trubisky lacks that with pretty much anyone else outside of Tariq Cohen. So you got to love Burton moving forward.
And you still, if Gronk was healthy, you would still put him above that tier.
Gronk would go above that Kittle and Burton tier. He'd be with the Ertzes and the Kelce's. But at this point, I think Ertz would be my guy. I mean, nobody runs routes quite like this guy, and the usage is just insane. He hasn't seen under 10 targets, I think, at a single time this year. Yeah. Whereas you got obviously Kelce, the better offense overall, and you got Gronk, the better talent. But to me, Ertz seems like he's the balance of all, everything on that formula, the safest bet week in and week out, even if the other two have higher ceilings each week. I think Ertz is just such a high floor. That's kind of how I would look at the tight ends moving forward.
Seems like the Eagles are maybe a little more reliant on Ertz than either of the other guys.
Yes, exactly.
All right, T.Y. Hilton and Marlon Mack, these are guys on your risers list. We thought Marlon Mack might be a good, maybe a good guy to plug in this week. You think this is going to be permanent?
It's tough to say because Frank Reich is such a committee whore that just loves to have as many backs involved. And there's not so often that I think the Colts will find themselves in such a positive game flow script for running backs. They do have a horrendous defense, but that didn't matter when you're facing the Bills that are just the most anemic offense. As just a quick side note, every single week I'm going to be bidding $4 to $5 on whatever defense is facing the Bills because I've done that for 3 straight weeks. And it's been a difference maker for me. I've won those weeks that I've had any team that's facing the Bills 19 points, 20 points. It doesn't matter. They're so bad. And that's what really helped Mack out is, one, they've had a horrible run defense, so that doesn't hurt a running back by any means. But two, you get up so big that you're just bleeding clock. So he saw 19 carries, 2 catches, and ultimately, over 150 total yards and 2 touchdowns. So a monster day from this guy. I expect this to definitely be his season highlight. I don't think that usage will continue when they find themselves, again, more behind in games. That's more of a Nyheim Hines script. It's going to remain a committee under Reich, but this does show if they can get a lead, Mack will come with some upside. He's still that explosive guy. He looks fully healthy was the key to see with Mack, that he finally looks fully healthy. Last year he ripped big play after big play. I think he led the league in percentage of runs going over 30 yards. So this guy can bring some explosiveness to any type of offense and any type of fantasy team. You just got to make sure it's a week where the game flow will make sense for him. And as you mentioned, T.Y. Hilton too. More so just to note, he looked fully healthy, finally back. 4 catches, 25 yards, 2 touchdowns. So what I love to see is he was getting blanketed all day by Tre'Davious White, but they were able to still stick in a couple short yardage scores to him, which is not usually T.Y.'s strength. But Frank Reich has been using him so much more different than he in his past, where he was just a deep threat, more of a chunk play. Frank Reich does love T.Y. in the short game and more of a red zone threat too. You love to see that, and he squeezed 2 in against one of the better corners in the league. It looks like Hilton's fully ready to go back into that high-end wide receiver 2, even low-end wide receiver 1 in the right matchups type of guy.
All right, let's talk about the guys that are falling. Eagles running backs, no consistency. Wendell Smallwood, Corey Clement. I got to say, when we weren't sure which guy to pick up, and some people lean one way, some lean the other. The only one of those guys I was able to pick up was Smallwood in one league. He didn't show up. Then all of a sudden there was all this buzz about Clement. And I have to say, although I was disappointed in my Smallwood pickup, I didn't really buy into Clement either. So it's not like I was then scrambling to get him. I was some people offered me Clement in a trade, after that, like thinking, oh, this guy, and I was like, no way, I'm not interested. I had some people offer me Clement for Jarvis Landry, believe it or not, and I was just like, go fuck yourself. Anyway, sorry, my daughter just walked into the room, so I kind of pulled up on that obscenity. But anyway. Anyway, you agree, right? Like, I mean, you can't really count on the Eagles running backs, right?
No, it's unfortunate because just last week we had a video released and everything that Clement was going to be the more reliable guy and he's going to be the one that really pulled away. But even still, despite outplaying Wendell Smallwood, he didn't earn more work. And this week he didn't look like he deserved it. 32 yards for Wendell Smallwood on 9 carries and then just a pathetic 6 yards on 2 rushes, 6 yards on 8 carries, for Clement. So he didn't do anything.
That's
just
so
a puke-worthy day from both of them. This backfield is a complete nightmare. Maybe those LaShawn McCoy trade talks or Le'Veon Bell, maybe that happens. Maybe they do now look more to make a backfield move, but this is just a reminder. And now, too, what was clear is their left tackle, Jason Peters, definitely looks banged up with a biceps injury, and that makes a huge difference along that line when he's not paving the paths. So, yes, the Panthers have a decent run defense, but they were nothing special. This wasn't a matchup that needed to be shied away from. So at this point, it's going to be really tough to trust those Eagles running backs. I told a lot of people to sell high that were asking questions about offers for Clement, so I'm glad I did. Ultimately, hopefully you did as well, because I would not be able to put either of these guys in my lineup unless I was completely desperate.
Agree with you completely on that.
We missed one riser. I know you wrote about him earlier too. I must have forgotten.
Oh yeah, he wasn't on the list. I was wondering why you didn't want to talk about him. But real quick, why don't we talk before we'll
Are
come?
You cool with going on about him?
Yeah. We'll go back to the fallers in just a second. But Kerryon Johnson, it's rare that I get to actually write a stock watch. My wife's home sick, and I'm in charge of the kids completely now, even more so than usual. And I found like 10 minutes while the kids were like outside shooting this Nerf gun, and my wife passed out on the couch. And that was right when the stock watch needs came out, and I immediately grabbed one and wrote. So I actually wrote one. I actually know about this guy. I mean, I'll give you the sales pitch that I put in the article, which is week 3, sure. The guy blew up against the Patriots. It was all of a sudden like it hadn't happened. There hadn't been like 100-yard Lions running back in years, like 4 years or something, 70 games, 5 years. And then for some reason, the next 2 games, they gave the guy 9 and 12 carries. And by the way, he did well in those games. He averaged like 6 yards a carry. Meanwhile, they're like splitting carries with LeGarrette Blount, who's averaging 3 yards a carry for the year. I mean, it's just like he's not even like good. It's crazy. It's maddening. You expect him to lose some stuff with Theo Riddick, the guy's like kind of the quintessential receiving scat back or whatever. But anyway, you end up with Kerryon Johnson. Then finally they decide they're going to give him the ball. 19 carries, 158 yards, throw in a couple catches for good measure. You would think at this point they're willing to go all in. The guy for the season is averaging 6.5 yards a carry. I mean, the stock has got to be up. You got to go with this guy, right? I mean, and to me at this point, if they're not giving him the ball, that's just idiocy on the Lions coaching staff part. And you do have to take that into consideration. I mean, there's precedent for the Lions being idiots. But to me, like, this is clearly the guy, pretty close to a feature back role, and he gets great numbers. Got to say stock up on Kerryon Johnson, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the talent is there. The usage is going up, and clearly the offense hums at a much different rate when they have this guy in there. He's as explosive as it comes. He's looking like one of the better running backs from this class for sure. The only concern for me is even with him dominating as he did this week and all these other weeks for the 6 yards a carry, as you're saying, Blount still remained involved this week. 10 carries, 50 yards, and a TD. And it's the TDs that are really, really pissing me off because obviously the vulture situation. The guy dominated, had over 18 fantasy points Kerryon did without having to score. But imagine if he was getting those goal line touchdowns. Over the last 3 weeks, Blunt's now vultured 3 straight touchdowns. So you got to still be annoyed that even with Kerryon playing as well as he is, they're not handing this off. And that's Matt Patricia. He comes from that Patriot system that has typically loved to have committees. That's the most annoying part. If he could ever shake LeGarrette Blount, he would be a running back one, no doubt, top 12 guy moving forward. But because Blount's annoying vulture ass lingers, I'd say he's still more of a RB2. But in the right matchups against like Miami, for example, he's going to explode. And this was definitely an explosion setup. So when the game script is right to have a heavy rushing total, Kerryon's going to be a monster. But otherwise, Blount caps that upside, I'd say, week to week. Unfortunately,
I agree. He's an RB2, not an RB1. But you agree he's got huge fantasy value at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
if somehow, if Blunt tore his ACL or the team just decided let's ride with Carry on all the way, he would blow up into a top 10 running back. He's
Agreed
got that
completely. All right, let's go back to fallers. Corey Davis, your boy.
Oh, God, not my boy.
I'm proud, and every now and then there's a guy that all of a sudden gets into your doghouse, and sometimes I'm with you the whole time. Like, we both bought into Eric Decker. I was screwed. Corey Davis, I never bought into for even 1 second. So the fact that anybody was ever believing in this guy, I just didn't buy it. I never saw the appeal. And you hate him now. You think he's, like, cuttable.
Oh, definitely. I'm going to be hate cutting him on quite a few leagues. There's nothing more cathartic than a good hate cut, and I hate
cut Decker last year.
I've used Corey Davis 6 out of 7 weeks this year. The 1 week I benched him was the 126-point day he had, which blew me my game by benching him for LaShawn McCoy, coincidentally. Both of them just killing I cannot stand these guys. But Corey Davis is just one of those guys that's so easy to write the game script for. Oh, he's a great talent, top 4 pick, and he's got all the usage in the world because there's no other receiving threats there, and their defense isn't great, so they're going to be throwing and playing. None of it ever pans out. It's so easy to think this guy's going to be great, and it's sexy to make that call, and it never works. I cannot stand him. You sit there watching this offense. The offense is hideous. It moves at a just snail's pace, bleeding clock and bleeding opportunities away, and him and Mariota just aren't connecting. He does look at him. Sure, he's getting targets, but there's only so often you can keep saying, oh, he led the team in targets again. He led the team in targets. And now he's getting out-targeted by Tajay Sharp. That's not even in his favor anymore. Taywan Taylor's making more plays than this guy. If he was as good as the number 4 overall pick says he was and all these scouts say he's supposed to be, then he would have actually made something happen because the opportunity is there for him to be a dominant target hog. It's nothing else. He's just not as good as everyone thinks he is. His surrounding talent is god-awful. The Titans are just horrendous. I don't want any part of them. And Corey Davis is going to be released this week, and I cannot wait to make that hate cut. It's going to feel so damn good.
All right, that's good stuff. And I agree with you completely. Stefon Diggs, you think he's more a wide receiver 2 than a wide receiver 1. I want to ask you, because Diggs is clearly a really good receiver. Cousins is a pretty good fantasy quarterback. Is this the product more of Adam Thielen being way better than anybody really was giving him credit for and being like a vacuum cleaner out there? I think he's the number 1 receiver in fantasy.
He's 100% the number 1 scoring receiver. And I was going to ask you, yes, one, that is a huge part of it, probably the biggest part of it. Would you rank Adam Thielen as your top fantasy receiver moving forward if you were doing the rest of the season big board?
I mean, I wouldn't, but that's probably just stupid. It's probably, it's like sometimes we see something's right there, and it's just like we continually don't believe it. It's like we're 7 weeks into the season. I don't even think Minnesota's had a bye, so I think we've seen this every week. And I mean, we look at this, and he's just putting up numbers and numbers and numbers. And it's like it's not like he's out of nowhere. The guy was a really good receiver last year. I mean, really good. Definitely top 10, maybe even like more than that. And it's just you kind of expect – I don't know if I'm expecting someone else to catch him or if I'm expecting him to slow down. Neither of those things seems particularly likely. I don't. No. Would he be your number 1 guy? I mean, he probably should be, but I don't know if I would take him 1.
I don't know if I would either. It's tough to it's crazy. You said 7 weeks in the year. He's gone over 100 yards in every single week. If you're going to ask me who I have the most faith in and putting up 15 to 20 points every single week, it's Thielen.
Or 25.
He hasn't gone under 20 yet. I mean, the guy is the most consistent receiver in the game. It's almost like having a bell cow back because he always sees at least 10 to 15 targets, and he always produces with them. That's the kind of difference between him this year and last year is the touchdowns. He's getting a ton of scores in addition to 100 yards every single week. I mean, that might be an NFL record at this point.
If that's correct, what you're saying, it is an NFL record. Who would you take number 1 moving forward if you had to?
It'd be tough for me to not take Antonio Brown off the bye.
I knew you were going to say that.
Got his bye week out of the way. It's just Antonio Brown. He's earned that for 7 straight years or whatever it is. There's just too much of a track record.
I think Juju's killing him. I mean, who you called? You said Juju was going to be great.
Juju is being great too, but Antonio Brown seemed to finally be rounding into form before the bye, and I think that's just going to only continue. And he's going to keep launching off. But yeah, I mean, if you were asking me first the rest of the season who's going to score the most points, it'd probably be Brown. But if you were at 1 week, you need 20 points. Who would you rather have? There's nobody I'd rather have than Adam Thielen. He's unbelievably consistent. And yeah, I mean, that's the rub on Diggs right now, who he originally started this conversation.
Right. We just gave him no play at all in this whole conversation.
And it's not even that Diggs is necessarily that much further below on the target totem pole. He had 14 targets this week. He hauled in 8 of them, but that was only for 33 yards. So for whatever reason, we expected Diggs to kind of be that guy that's dominating all the jump ball contested situations, going down the deep end of the field, more vertical, those deeper quadrants. It's not Diggs. It's Thielen who's doing all that great stuff that we were hoping Diggs would be doing. And as a result, Diggs has been more the underneath, the quick hits, and he's just not breaking the tackles like we've come to know with Diggs. He's still going to be great. He's still a very, very high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1. I'm not saying you write off Diggs, you put him on your bench. Nothing like that. The guy is a monster. But whereas Thielen, every single week, you know what you're getting, and it's consistent, and you can rely on it. Diggs has had quite a few duds mixed into his blow-ups, too. So he's facing the Saints next week. He'll destroy the Saints, let's say. You're never going to bench Diggs. It's just more so you can't rely on him as your true number one target hog horse, because even if he sees the targets, he's just not doing as much as Adam Thielen at this point.
All right, some injuries going on we want to talk about. Sony Michel. Yeah. Sony Michel, guy that I own and I was happy hanging on to for a long time. Was happy to see him blow up. He went out pretty early in that Bears game, got tackled, and his kind of leg moved in weird directions. It looks like it's not altogether serious. He's listed as week to week right now. Of course, that could still be a lingering thing that could hamper him a while, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And they carried him off, and it looked horrible. But thankfully, Adam Schefter let us know that there was no structural damage, which is great. It's looking like maybe an MCL sprain is the original prognosis, which is usually a couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. I wouldn't be shocked. I believe the Patriots have a week 11 or week 12 bye. I would not be surprised to see him held out until then, unless it is just that much lighter that he's back next week. You never really know with these things. Until then, James White's just going to be a just complete dominant RB1, which he already was with Sony in the lineup, scoring 20 or so points. But the increased red zone workload, Sony was third in the league with 21 red zone carries. That's just after just starting to take over that role. So that volume will likely go to White, the more reliable guy. I mean, Kedjon Barner will get mixed in. He came in and got 10 carries this week. He might end up getting a few goal line looks as well, and is worth a free agent ad off the waiver wire as a guy that could be a touchdown bet, especially against the just pathetic Bills. You imagine if they get up big early, they'll want to protect White, just a key cog of this offense. And maybe you're getting a 15-20 carry day from Barner this week. A great 1 week stab at minimum in this right type of matchup. Probably would disappear the next week against Green Bay, where that's much more of a James White type of game flow. But ultimately, great 1 week stab for Barner. White moving forward is just that much more valuable. He's already been probably the pick of the year. This 10th, 11th, 12th rounder that's been a top 5 running back at this point. So and I just love that. I was saying this guy's a true RB1, got tons of shit on Twitter. Everyone's saying you're overreacting. We know the Patriots, he's always just been an ancillary piece. He's had big games. And I said, great. Sell him to me. Everyone's saying sell high. I'll buy low because I believe in this. And that's just one of those fantasy, things when there's people that don't believe in somebody. That's one of those immediate buying lessons not a lot of people talk about is there's lots of people who think of flukes. Let's say Phillip Lindsay so far this year. If you bought on him a couple of weeks ago when people still thought he was a fluke, you would have got a great value. I didn't even believe in the guy. I would have been willing to sell him for lower than he is. And now he's a quality RB2 that you probably could have bought for a wide receiver 4 price. That's just a little fantasy lesson is if you buy into one of these guys that other people are labeling as flukes and sell highs, that's just the same as buying low on a stud that's underperforming too, which not a lot of people cover. I think that'd be an interesting article actually someday.
I agree, and I believe in White very much. As you know, I traded White very early in the season. I think before week 1 in my hometown league, I received Emmanuel Sanders for him. So
not a horrible trade, especially if Demarius gets moved.
Emmanuel Sanders is a top 5 wide receiver. So I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like I don't feel like I got killed on it, but that's like I'm cringing a little bit. That guy offered to trade me White back this week for Sony Michel straight up, and I turned him down.
Dang.
Yep.
Damn, imagine you pulled that one off.
I mean, I was just like, to me it seemed like kind of a lateral move almost, and I was like, I don't want to gamble and lose. I really like Sony Michel, and then he got hurt. Right. Yeah, that would have been nice. Anyway, LaShawn McCoy, speaking of guys that are injured, that who the hell really cares? But we'll talk about it anyway, Wolf.
It just sucks. I mean, you had fresh off 2 10-point days in a row, so it seemed like he was finally hitting his groove. And then, of course, because I put him in my lineup, I imagine, he decided to get concussed from second play of the game after 1 yard. And it was out after a tough hit. There's ankle ailments as well as part of that, but the concussion was the more worrisome part in concussion protocol right now, which means just Chris Ivory has to be added. He racked up a solid, I think, 80 total yards in his absence and just has always run the ball hard and well. well. So ultimately, if Shady misses time on Monday Night Football and you're actually relying on him, you better go get Chris Ivory as your backup plan. And even if you don't have Shady, not a bad flex plug and play. It just is tricky because if McCoy does play, then Ivory's useless, and you had to wait all the way to Monday night. So tricky situation. He's more of a handcuff, in my opinion, than the guy you pick up to start. I'd be looking more at like Kenjon Barner or Jalen Rashad. Some of these other guys we'll talk about in a second as 1 week streamers. But Shady, just let's hope he gets traded to the Eagles or something at this point, because that offense is so just abysmal. It's awful to watch. And this is just awful for Shady. Just cannot seem to stay on the field. That high mileage, 30 years old, it seems to finally all be catching up to him. There's nothing to really like about him at this point.
It's awful. The offense is awful, and it's like we've known it from day one.
We knew it was going to happen.
There's no surprises here.
Nothing unpredictable there.
Right. Dolphins wide receiver core. Speaking of a group I'm not interested in.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what's there to say? Albert Wilson potentially lost the season, and unfortunately, he was really exploding these last couple of weeks. But he suffered a hip injury that Drew Rosenhuis is saying best case would be a few weeks. It could be a full, season at this point. Kenny Stills left at the last drive of the game with a groin injury. So all this is Thursday night. If you're desperate for a streamer, Danny Amendola might be your guy. He had a big week. He's the clear-cut target hog at this point. Maybe if you need that explosion, you look at Jakeem Grant. You might even get a useful week out of Devontae Parker, which is insane to say. But after complaining, his agent came out and whined, and maybe the squeaky wheel gets greased for 1 week, because he's very much rumored to be a trade, a guy that's available for trade. And oftentimes you'll see teams kind of showcase these guys to try to get some type of value off of them. I could see Parker getting a sneaky 5 to 6 targets, and that could ultimately yield against a Texans team that's not great on the back end. One of those guys will have a big Thursday night game. My guess would be Danny Amendola, widely available, a decent stream if you're desperate with these bye weeks. That's really where I'd look. But maybe it's Jakeem Grant, who's had a couple blow-ups. Maybe it's Parker. Any of those guys could be streamers this week, guaranteed how banged up that core is.
All right, Matt Breida, or Breda, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He was also injured. He was kept, I think, 5 carries. Maybe even it was like 5 snaps. I don't remember. But instead of necessarily focusing on that injury, we're going to actually talk about a guy who's maybe a penny stock in his stead. So why don't you talk to us about him?
Yeah, Raheem Mostert. He's just my must-add kind of Week 8 waiver wire stash or potential stream if Breida ends up sitting. He's been their leading rusher for 2 straight weeks now, thanks to Matt Breida just constantly being banged up. But whether Breida plays or not, you could just tell this is a ticking time bomb. At some point, he's going down, whether it's for a whole season or extended period of time. It doesn't matter, because he is going to get hurt. He's already has a shoulder, a knee, an ankle, and just keeps getting re-aggravated. And this week, as compared to last couple weeks, Shanahan said maybe we take a different approach. That's something we'll have to look at to long and hard, how we're going to handle Matt Breida this week. So that kind of suggests they might rest this guy, give him a chance to finally get healthy, in which case Mostert would be a complete monster. He's facing Arizona this week, the worst run defense in the league, giving up the most points. And Mostert, like I just said, the leading rusher the last 2 weeks, 59 yards on just 7 carries this week, 8.4 yards a carry, 4 catches, 19 yards. So a solid, productive day, fresh off an 87-yard on 12 carry performance against Green Bay. This guy brings 4.38 speed to the table, kind of came in as a kick returner and has bounced around the league since 2015. Hasn't really got a chance as a runner. Wasn't even that big of a runner in college at Purdue, but has always had that long speed. And Shanahan just knows how to find guys, has an eye for talent. And so far this year, he's really flashed that patience, that vision you look for with his zone blocking scheme. And just surprising for a guy with that speed, has decent tackle breaking ability as well. He's broken a lot of tackles when given the chances this year. So all those things combined for huge play potential in this zone blocking scheme. I've always been a diehard fan of whoever's running behind Shanahan's scheme. Right now, it's looking like it could be Mostert against the easiest matchup in the league for Week 8, and then just a great stash moving forward, considering that Breida just can't stay on the field. One of my favorite, in a barren waiver wire this week, Mostert's one of my favorite guys to add.
All right, we went a little longer than we thought we would, but the Monday night game is actually just about to get underway. I am going to ask you one more question. This is for my daughter. She's really into Transformers, and she wanted me to ask you a question. She just passed me a note. We all know that Megatron is Calvin Johnson. If you had to, if you were going to label a football player to be Optimus Prime's equivalent, What
Optimus
football player would you
Prime.
say is the most like Optimus Prime, leader of the Autobots?
He's like the leader, right?
Yeah,
Like,
he's the
beast.
big boss, the good guy. I mean, Megatron was the bad guy, but
Right. I would say it's got to be Gurley at this point. I mean, the
okay.
guy is just dependable, reliable, and you go to when you need him the most. I mean, Gurley, 43. I saw this stat earlier today. 43 red zone carries. The next closest was 23. So I mean, he's almost doubled up the next closest guy in red zone carries, and that's like Optimus Prime, dependable,
Sure.
go to it, the clutch
Dependable.
situation, just gets it done every single time. That's Gurley. You're getting 30 points a week. It's insane. I don't remember the stat exactly, but I think it's been like it might not be ever in the history of fantasy that a player has been the top scorer and then repeated that feat. Gurley's going to potentially do that. I mean, there's no reason he wouldn't do that as long as he stays healthy at this point, because it's just been the volumes there. The offense is more explosive than ever before. It's a cheat code. It's just unfair if you own Todd Gurley. Welcome to your fantasy playoffs and probably another title run. It's unbelievable. That's Optimus Prime to me.
Yeah, there you go. Unless he gets hurt, he's going to do all the things you're talking about. All right,
Yep.
You got any social media you want to pump up?
Of course, me personally, Roto Street Wolf, any sit-start questions. I know I was a little inactive this weekend because of the Chicago trip, so I apologize if I missed anything. I tried to still hit it all, but I might have been more inebriated than usual. But Roto Street Wolf on Twitter is where you can find me. Roto Street Journal on Facebook, Instagram, Roto ST Journal. On Twitter, of course, the main page, rotostreetjournal.com. rotostreetjournal.com/stockwatch is where you can find all of these blurbs and much more that we discuss on this podcast. You'll see another 10 or so blurbs every Monday and Tuesday night getting updated nonstop. We got a great writing crew handling all that. And then, of course, as we previewed at the beginning, we are your lead blocker, Fantasy Fullback Dive. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button. Get every single podcast just delivered right to you and get every question in. We got our Week 8 preview coming up. So if you have any sit-start questions, trades, dilemmas, hit us up. Let us know. We'll hit it in the mailbag, and we'll make sure to get you that title this year, baby.
And just to be clear, my daughter just passed me a note, and she says she would say that Optimus Prime is Von Miller. Anyway.
That's good attacking.
Not bad. I thought he was going to murder Josh Rosen on Thursday, by the way.
God, terrifying.
Anyway, my name's Nat the Truth Jones.
And I'm the Wolf. Best of luck in Week 8 pack.
Later, guys.
We used to have it all.